Hello everybody, I'm your host for this episode, Tiger Eyes 45, and this is your newbie Noah.
I am your newbie Noah. I am your newbie Noah. People need to hear my voice.
At least you're doing better
Noah.
than Jackie Paper at the beginning.
Oh man, oh you're right. I've got it.
Don't go suddenly silent, I thought maybe your thing glitched. At least you moved.
And now I'm Jackie Paper and I can talk again.
So, Noah, do you have any explanation or reason why you didn't catch this 1978 children's animated movie?
Was
Puff
it really
the Magic
that late?
Dragon.
1978. I guess that explains it. I mean, well, for starters, just for a nice fresh starter as we open up the meal, I didn't know there was a special. I knew there was a novelty song called Puff the Magic Dragon, which I assume that most people know at this point because it gets referenced, all over, everywhere from, animation to film to comics, so whatever. Everybody loves to, make a pun on Puff the Magic Dragon, presumably because it's just the most, that, it's the most sort of that title to ever exist. It's so, smarmy and cheerful and aggressively fantastical. It's memeable. It's a memeable title. I didn't expect going into the animated special for it to lean into it so hard. It looked like a Hallmark commercial had it looked like a Hallmark store had gone over the edge and gone full unhinged and went on a baseless rampage of adorable cuteness. It looked like it ran into the production studio the day after Bambi was finished, being prepared for release, took all of the animated slides and then went into a secret lab somewhere off of the coast and sliced them open and cut off the faces of all the adorable critters and pasted them onto all the backdrops of, trees and such, and created, a horrific Frankenstein of cheerfulness that the world wouldn't be ready for decades.
I was gonna say it's got a very Betty Boop animated style, but sure, that works too.
I think that it deserves
old classic
yes.
Tugboat Disney bullshit where everything in the background is animals and moving.
Except for the unicorn that passes by every now and again with the smile going all the way up, the face. That's very, 1970s. That I can't attribute to Bambi Frankensteining. That's a very 1970s sort of animated thing.
I think the issue is I've seen this movie so much, I don't know what unicorn you're talking about.
Oh.
I must be so used to the crazy background. I just don't notice it anymore.
The thing about this song is it's so the song itself, we'll get to the song, is really good.
Yeah, no, it's great.
The song itself is really good, but everything about the song and how they've chosen to adapt it is the most utterly parodyable thing that every once in a while, instances, for example, like that passing unicorn in the background that looks like it dropped out of a Schoolhouse Rock or maybe a Fractured Fairy Tale, look like self-parody. You have shot the moon and I can't process this as anything other than self-parody. And then it goes right back to being super sincere on a level that I just can't find fault with. And it's I think you are sincere. It's just you had one character designer that was trying to, take the Mickey out on you a little.
Okay. Well.
So wait a minute. Okay. I've got some theories. I've got a handful of theories.
I want to hear
Most of them involve, MGM needing to fill some VHSs to sell to small children's parents. But how did you catch this?
Oh, a relative I no longer speak to had it on VHS. And I imagine she bought it because it was something she could show to her two daughters when they were growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever she would babysit me, I would just end up seeing it. It was one of the go-tos. It was that and the TMNT 1980 series. And those were the only two things I watched at her house. It was either Puff or Turtles. Nothing else. Until I was
everyone's favorite,
older.
Yeah. Everyone's favorite, black plastic and magnetic babysitter, the VHS tape.
I was actually the only one of my siblings who would just sit down and be quiet and watch TV. So while everyone else had to be distracted in other ways with her actually playing games with them, she would just put on a VHS with me, give me a puzzle to do, and I would be good. I would do that puzzle again and again all day.
Wow. There's so much in the Taylor origin story that we keep learning here.
I'll put me outside or give me a puzzle. Those are my two things. But
that's when the mind powers developed.
I was a baby. I've been watching this movie for as long as I can remember. I can't even recall the first time I watched it. The most vivid memory I have of it is sitting in bed doing a puzzle on this TV food stand that she gave me.
Yep.
And the movie going on, and I had to get up 6 times to replay it before I was done with the puzzle.
The truth be told, I can't imagine a small child ever watching this without a TV tray in the room. I don't know why.
That's my most vivid memory of it, but I know I've seen it before then because I was singing the song the entire time. But
I think what's really telling there is that you're telling me you did a 2-hour puzzle at that age.
Yeah, no, by
a 2-hour puzzle that could fit on a TV tray.
Yeah, by the time I was 10 years old, I was doing 1,000-piece puzzles because I didn't have anything better to do with my time aside from reading or losing myself in the woods. So it was like a 500-piece puzzle that was like super tiny.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was like, you've already done all the others, I'm just gonna go to Walmart and grab a random puzzle for you. So it was like a super tiny 500-piece puzzle that took me fucking forever.
And that's when he decided to develop telekinesis, like Matilda.
I fucking wish.
Were it not for the insidious interference of the contemporary puzzle industry, you would have developed telekinesis like Matilda.
Also one of my favorite movies as a kid.
I have not seen that one either, is the funny thing.
I'm heartbroken! Noah!
Add it to the list. That's why we have the podcast, is that I haven't seen anything. It's all just an elaborate excuse for me to see things that I ought to have seen and also chat with you about them. Spoilers.
Well, I appreciate the conversations.
So, do you still spend multiple hours watching this up till now? When was the last time you sat down for a good old puff?
So when we decided to show this for Dragon Month, which everything happened, so Dragon Month didn't end up being one consistent month, I remembered that this was a thing right before mentioning to you, and I insisted because it was short, it was nice, it had a song that went with it, and they were two different things, and there's plenty of discussion. But the last time I watched it was about like a month and a half ago when we decided to put it on the list, and I made Daniel sit down and watch it. And when he watched it the first time and left, I replayed it twice more. And that would be the last time. I really like it.
Yeah, clearly. And it's funny, I guess, of course, it's so fascinating, I guess, that you'd still be so in touch with the part of you that engages with it so much you'd watch it over and over again. Because I think everybody that grew up in a house with a VHS player, or in the case of, the Gen Alpha superpowered mutants that are coming up behind us, I assume, that grew up with literally any device with a screen that allowed them to watch things over and over again. Everybody that was a child that had that opportunity was doing that, right? Was watching their favorite thing and then watching it again and again. Maybe not all of us were doing it while doing a puzzle, and we're doing it literally back to back to back. We didn't all have that specific thing to do to keep us from developing mind powers that would have wrecked the Eastern Seaboard.
It was the perfect distraction. Just hum the song and do the puzzle.
Maybe that's what Franklin Richards should have been doing, and he wouldn't have caused all that trouble. Man, maybe Hickman should have been doing that, and then he couldn't have caused all that trouble with Franklin Richards. Anyway,
I still can't believe that he's supposed to be the most powerful mutant in all of Marvel. Like, I can't believe that. It's just okay, whatever. That's not.
We can't get into Hickman Marvel right now. We're supposed to be talking about happy things. So I am happy for you that you're still in touch with that. Like that it still engages with you so much. I don't think that there is. I can't think off the top of my head of a childhood property that I would like sit down, watch all the way through, and then just by merit of like pure nostalgia alone, or I guess potentially in your case, just genuine, the same interaction you had as a child, not like the memory of that interaction, sit down and watch it all the way through again. I just can't think of anything that does that for me.
Oh, I have like a whole list. TMNT, the 2003 series, specifically the Sane episode, same as it never was and everything that came after it. Lord of the Rings, and this. TMNT 1980 series 2, when I could find YouTube videos of it online, but those are really the only things.
Well, it's, you know, I'm glad that it brings you so much joy. It definitely, you know, brought me a lot more joy than I was expecting from a random TV special. I was expecting something like something along the same line as your average Rankin and Bass production, which is to say not good, and also, you know, vaguely, I don't know, just unpleasant, I guess, on some level. But it wasn't that really at all. I mean, you know, it was, you know, a late 1970s television special based on a novelty song.
I can't believe you think I would purposely show you something that was just bad and awful and, like, not good at all. It's not like I've already done that with another series at all, whatsoever.
I guess I didn't know what to expect. I expected smarmy and loud and, like, I don't know. Here's a metaphor. I expected, like, the modern version of Figment the Dragon from Disney's Epcot. I expected the modern Figment. And what I got instead was a weird older Figment, the happier one that's actually pleasant to be around.
This was basically Puff the Magic Dragon and Pete the Dragon, the Disney movie.
Another one I haven't seen.
Holy shit! That's another one I had on VHS. But it was from
We need another month of dragons.
Not right off the bat, though. We're gonna put some time between those.
The year of dragons. The age of dragons.
We're now a dragon-only podcast. Sorry if it doesn't have a dragon in it, we ain't discussing it.
You didn't catch that dragon.
But, that's not actually what I thought your reaction would be. I just thought you would be like, oh, this is clearly just a goofy kid show. It's kind of nice. The song's really good, but this is just meh. That's what I was expecting.
I mean, don't overstate my reaction. There was a lot of meh to it, but I don't know. Imagine like the quality of an above average Schoolhouse Rock episode, like equally distributed over 27 minutes, such that like it had me going emotionally for a couple seconds here or there. Or, you know, I don't know, maybe I'm just more emotionally receptive to like
at the very beginning.
I'm very like receptive, I think, to like children's schlock. That's something that I have just sort of cultivated in myself, you know, a bit of a sap. But you know, I did find it compelling. Not nearly as impactful if I had listened to the song first out of the context of the movie. I think I'm one of the first people to just watch the show first and then listen to the song.
No, I saw the show first.
Oh,
I saw the show first, and then the relative played the song for me, and that is how I found out about it.
Okay, well, never mind then. I'm not entering the higher echelons of true Puff fans. I am just a man watching a dragon cure a kid's vague, unspecified nonverbalness. So, okay. Hey, that does bring us to our first section. And do you have an instrument you want to give us some weird riffing on to bring us into the first section?
Mine are very untuned.
Okay, well, in that case, we could do the scat again.
Or we could just go into it.
What? What? You don't want to do the musical interlude? Taylor, our musical interlude is part of our thing. It's part of our brand. What will our social media manager say?
You're literally just practicing guitar.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. You have no respect for the artistry. You have no respect for me. You have no respect for music. You have no respect for anything. Okay.
Listen,
as it happens.
That may be true, but that's not the point of this.
As it happened then. The section where we talk about things as they happened.
Okay, so basically, there are two things we have to explain in this. The first I'm going to go into is the song, because the song technically came first. And the song is actually based off of a poem written by Lipton, who worked with Peter Yarl to turn it into a song together, and they share royalties on it. And then Peter played it with his band. Peter, I don't remember the rest of the name, but it's the three people in the band's name together. And basically in the song, it's all about a dragon who meets a kid, and they grow up together having fun, and like meeting kings and pirates and scaring everyone who would do harm away. And the song ends with Peter Paper growing up, or Jackie Paper growing up, and dying of old age. And at that point, the Puff the Magic Dragon stops coming to visit Cherry Lane where Jackie lived, and just stays home forever because his best friend's dead. Why would he ever leave? And then you have the movie, which is a lot more upbeat, and it has interludes where it plays the song from time to time. Like, it'll play the song at the beginning talking about how Jackie and Puff met. But in the animated movie, Puff is a grown dragon already and is really there to help Jackie, who hasn't spoken in an unspecified amount of time, but it's a very long time, and his parents are worried after some therapists or children's psychologists come and visit and say, your son will never talk again, he'll never fit in with society, you might as well give up. A miracle could happen, but we as scientists frowned upon that. And then they leave. They don't say anything else.
Luckily, we've got ourselves a grandpa puppy to save the day.
Which, do you want to explain what a grandpa puppy is?
I feel like I've mentioned it before in our Never-Ending Story episode, but it's my word for what a trope of a character that has come up a couple of times in some of these shows, and I think is particularly resonant for one of the two of us as a character. You know, it's this older, generally male character that spends most of their time being worried about the safety of kids that they're protecting, and also happens to be really cute or funny or adorable or all three. You know, your Puddleglums, your Falcors, or in this case, your Puff the Magic Dragon.
My face is so red now. I'm so mad with you. But that is so accurate. So
Puff the Magic Dragon. He's just a grandpa puppy. He's just a big old grandpa puppy.
Basically.
And he's just strolling along, and he happens upon this poor, depressed maybe, kid.
Who's no longer talking, and he starts with a joke, and when the kid doesn't laugh, he's like, oh, something seriously is wrong. So he grabs some construction paper, after inviting himself into the kid's room, makes the paper form of him, and takes what makes Jackie Draper alive, and put it in Jackie Paper, who can go on an adventure without harming Jackie Draper at all. So it's basically taking his mind and going on a journey while leaving his physical body behind so that he's not actually in any danger, which is a key aspect of the grandpa puppy characters I like, because I hate it when they put kids in danger. I can't stand it. If someone else puts them there, fine, but when they do it, they're immediately on my shit list. So, Puff Magic Dragon and Jackie are sailing around, and they're going on this adventure, and the song cuts back in and mentions a pirate, and Jackie's like, wait, there's gonna be a pirate here? Because he could talk when he's Jackie Paper. And he freaks out. And Puff's like, don't worry, we'll see what's coming. and they meet the pirate, whose name I don't remember, but it turns out the pirate doesn't want to be a pirate, and he doesn't want to be mean. He wants to be a chef. So Jackie talks to him and convinces him to follow his passion, and the pirate finds a new love in the new work he does and bakes them food. Then they keep sailing, and they meet a star that has been mocked by storm clouds so much it forgot to love itself and fell out of the sky. So Jackie has to help the star get back up into the sky, past the angry clouds that are laughing at them and trying to keep them down. And Puff just throws himself off the boat because he's too heavy. So Jackie's just sailing through a storm in talking clouds on his own to help the star. And that's when he gets a Medal of Bravery. You can see where this is going. Teaching very basic moral lessons to kids. It's like what traits are really good and great to have. And the last one is when they finally get to the land of Hanalei, which is where Puff has been taking Jackie to help him grow, it's not exactly said if it's him growing past what's keeping him from talking or if it's something else, but basically they have to go to Hanalei to help Jackie talk again. And when they get there, they meet the Sneezes, which are just people who are basically only a nose, and they all have runny noses, and they have to be cured of their sickness. And because Hanalei is sick, because the runny nose have left disease everywhere, Jackie has to be the one to help because Puff no longer has magic powers. And Puff's like, no, don't worry, you go home, I'll handle this. And then he goes to a cave and curls up to die. That's how he's handling it. Puff got depressed, guys. It's sad. But Jackie
Dragons
doesn't give
in depression, man. Don't let them mix.
He doesn't give up. And so he calls upon everybody else who has helped them, and they cure the sniffling Sneezes, who are all better now. And Hanalei is healed and bright and happy again. And then Puff takes Jackie home, and he talks to his parents, who are so happy they give him a hug. And it ends with a farewell message from Puff. Mm-hmm. That is the movie.
23 minutes of sheer, unadulterated, smarmy joy, except for a few minutes there when you think it's genuinely going to end with Jackie leaving. Because that's the thing. I know it's a very clear fake out that Jackie is going to come back and save the day. But also when I was watching it, I think it was something about the emotional sincerity of the song at the time and like how emotionally compelling the visuals were that I was like, wow, does it just genuinely end here? Does it just call me a sucker? I genuinely thought for a second, man, it would be really emotionally impactful if it just ended there with Jackie having learned his lesson, but there being something that he just genuinely cannot fix about this world, and he leaves and he goes back and he's healed, and there's still, I don't know, the problem unsolved. It's very, I don't know.
And that would have been also a valuable lesson to teach. And would have been closer to how the song ends. But Definitely. That's not what happens here.
Nope. It just, total fake out. He's back. I think it helps that it is literally the end of the song, more or less, right?
Yeah.
That they are playing is, Puff the Magic Dragon. For a second there, I forgot his name. For just a brief second there, I forgot the name of Puff the Magic Dragon. The song they're playing is Puff the Magic Dragon, who lives by the sea, goes into his cave, is just the end of the song, right? That ends all sad with, the boy dead and gone, or maybe adult and gone. Anyway, I think that it says something that the song genuinely ends that way. And there was a point when I genuinely thought that the show would end that way. I feel like that speaks to like the emotional impact of the song. It like conveys in it somehow the poetic necessity of that sad ending.
It's funny that you bring that up, because one time when I was a kid, I fell asleep watching this movie, and I had just like heard the song recently, and I was basically replaying the movie in my mind, but it ended with Jackie leaving, and Puff being depressed, and the whole adventure was like Pete the Dragon meeting Puff the Dragon, and the two of them learning how to like deal with humans dying together. That was my dream. Is
there a human dying in Pete too?
No, but like it's in Pete the Magic Dragon movie, whatever the fuck it's called, the dragon is thought to be imaginary by the little boy who is being abused by his relatives or whatnot, and that's why he has to live in the woods alone. Might have been a little girl. I don't remember. Point of the matter is, a kid is being abused, so they run away from home and they have to live in the woods, but people realize this is happening and try to help them. But the family realize people are helping the kid and wants to take advantage of everything they're getting, so the dragon finally shows himself to be real and fights all the bad guys. And that's the end of the movie, from what I remember. I see. In my dreams, they just tag teamed. They just chilled together for the rest of their lives.
Vivid tag team dream. So, that's sort of the switch of the ending there.
Yep.
That's sort of the big significant change. I mean, besides all the introduction of like new, all the elements of the morals and like having Jackie not be all that brave and making that like his arc. And honestly, there were a lot of elements that got added, truthfully. Jackie not, being nonverbal at the start, this being, it's sort of...
That actually plays heavily into the themes that were changed, which could move us on to our next topic.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you mean that?
Yes. So there is a whole set of these big morals that kind of get conveyed. These ideas of like bravery, confidence, and compassion. And I don't know, they get an added, it's common fare for this sort of, thing for children, handled, I don't know, with a clear sincerity, and, a clear sense of whimsy that's, genuine. At the same time, they get like an added level of significance because it's not framed around, here is a kid that's kind of mean that needs to learn compassion, or here is a kid that's a coward that needs to learn to be brave. It doesn't really open planting any of these elements at all, except that Jackie doesn't talk and hasn't for a while. And this is something so serious that, doctors think will last forever. And it's very unspecific. It's very general, but it also like conveys a profound necessity, for something to change, but what isn't clear. I don't know. And that's, I think, one of the interesting ways that it makes things a bit more compelling.
I think there's a lot of changes from the song to the movie, which one being Jackie was the one engaging in the adventures and Puff came along to help out in the song. Whereas in the movie, Puff is the one engaging in the adventures and is taking Jackie along. Mm-hmm. In the song, Puff is learning a lesson, but in the movie, it's Jackie, and he learns a lot of lessons, but it's his life essence going on a journey to help him. It's the miracle. And I don't know, there's not a lot of miracles that are shown in like this kind of old television that aren't like religious.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just a kid going on an emotional journey, probably inside of his imagination, dealing with his own shit before getting better. And I like that. I think I like that message a little bit more than I like how the song goes, which is, I don't know. It's a little morbid. The song's a little morbid, even though it's so morbid. Upbeat.
Especially if you subscribe to the song is about the death of the child interpretation.
Yeah.
It's definitely got that sort of element of it. The song, in my like, very important one listen through, which will be playing over and over in my brain till the day I die, don't you worry.
Yes! Victory!
Looking over the lyrics, my kind of takeaway was less this was about the story about, human mortality versus, immortal elements of fantasy and how, and watching one of those elements of fantasy come to grips with, grief and death and reality and, the death of childhood and stuff like that. I think it was, more literally about that, the death of childhood. It's about, a little boy, not being a little boy anymore. Little boys don't live forever. They become bigger and they become quote unquote men, and they lose interest in things like this. And what, the dragon is dealing with is still the same, functionally in terms of what's actually happening in the story, the absence of this friend being abandoned.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess that interpretation makes it less morbid, but still kind of grief filled.
I don't know if I don't know. Honestly, I think that's still just as morbid because the death of childhood is still fucking sad as hell. But I don't know if Puff is going on the same journey in both, because in the end, he doesn't have to really deal with Jackie leaving.
I don't mean both the animated special and the song. I mean in both interpretations of the song, whether Jackie is dead or Jackie is an adult.
Okay.
In both, in the animated show, it's a very different thing. The dragon, like you said, the dragon's already, he knows how this ends. He's doing a Nanny McPhee.
Yeah. I stay until you don't need me anymore.
Until you don't need me anymore, and then I go.
And that's usually when you don't want me to.
It's very, it's very much that.
Shows.
But there's also something deeper to it, right? It's not just that he's doing an Nanny McPhee. It's not just that, like, that's sort of the arc that it's about him learning a lesson, right? There's more to it than that.
I mean, yes, if you move past just what basically it was supposed to be, there is more to it. There's a lot more to the song, I feel, than there is to the animated series, which I found out had 2 sequels today that I did not know about, and I will be watching later.
Maybe that's where the added tragedy and depth comes in. Alternatively, maybe that's where what I expected comes in.
Maybe. I'm not sure. But I haven't seen them, so I can't say. But
spoilers in the chat.
In the show, in the movie, the big morals are bravery, confidence, compassion. Those are what Jackie needs to become a functioning member of society again. Those are what he needs to come to terms with to overcome his fears and talk again. But in the song, while yes, there are the face value lessons that are going up about growing up and life changing and losing your childhood innocence, there's also a nostalgic feel to it. It stays upbeat for the entire time. The song does not have a sad mood. It's like, this is inevitable. So while you don't cheer for it, you can come to terms with it. It almost feels like to me. Especially with, like, just how the music is played. That's what I've always read into it. It's a way to talk about it and come to terms with it without being overcome by the grief that is inevitable reality.
Yeah, it's definitely, I was surprised I did not expect it to be another entry in that classic genre, which is, using, fantasy, children escapism into the world of imagination as an avenue for discussing grief specifically. And what makes it unique is that usually in those stories, your Bridges to Terabithia, your Neighbor's Totoro, and, among others, is that usually it's very much specifically about the child undergoing grief and having to deal with death for the first time, and either finding that they can't go into fantasy anymore as a consequence of that, or trying to use fantasy as a way to avoid having to think about that or the potential for that.
But instead,
whereas here, go
ahead.
Yeah. Whereas here, instead, it's the critter. It's the fantasy that has to live without the human.
You can almost...
That's sadder.
You can almost take it as it's the imagination that lasts after your death, the things you've left behind, what you've created that will outlive you. Looking back and realizing you're no longer there to create more of it. If you want to look at it from that perspective, which I kind of always interpreted it as. Yeah.
That kind of ties into why I kind of was starting to read into it as well. Just the sense that this recursive element of it, like it's your creation that is lingering after your life and having to deal with your own loss. It's, and in the same way, if you subscribe to the interpretation that the story is not about Jackie dying but growing up, the implication becomes, additionally dire. It's not just that Jackie grew up, it's that a part of him died somehow. That he grew up in a way that killed part of him that didn't need to be killed.
You can look at it like that, and that's definitely one interpretation of it if you subscribe to it's just Jackie growing up. If you take the lyric literally and think of it as Jackie literally dying, it's that, I don't know, there's kind of more hope in that interpretation if Jackie's actually dead versus it's just his childhood that's dead, because in that way, his creation has lived on, his imagination has lived on, and while he's no longer affecting it, other people who are experiencing it are. So that kind of seems more hopeful to me, and that's just
then
what
the
I've
alternative.
always thought.
Then the alternative that Puff has been abandoned to die along with the rest of like the joy and happiest parts of Jackie's psyche,
But
like some sad abandoned Webkins dying in a server somewhere off the coast of California.
But Noah, dragons don't die. The song even said.
I forgot. He's doomed to live forever alone.
Yes. Exactly.
Oh boy. Honestly, screw Twilight and all vampire fiction. There's no more compelling tale about the tragedy of immortality than Puff the Magic Dragon.
Honestly, like, and the movie doesn't really touch on that at all. And I understand why the movie doesn't. But I kind of wish it had. I kind of wish it focused on Puff being sad for a little bit longer and him being contemplative, because in the movie, he's the one that has all the answers. He knows what's going to happen. He knows that he has a way out of the situation to keep Jackie safe and keep himself safe. So when his home is dead and there's nothing he can do to fix it, I kind of wish he had gotten to say something and lament a little bit about his dead home after he sent Jackie away. Because while just watching him be sad and alone with the music playing in the background is kind of pulls on your heartstrings. I don't know. I wanted to know his thoughts more.
Yeah.
I would have liked that.
And it's funny because that is an instance, the rare instance where what they're doing is very explicitly just a literal representation of the song.
Yeah.
The procession, Puff's, grief is expressed through these elements of him quietly moving to his cave and staying there and not going out anymore. There's no actual internal thoughts. It's just expressed through direct action, which is good for, writing in a non-visual setting. But not for when you're adapting to a fuller visual story. It's funny.
Not when you've already had Puff be voicing all of Jackie's concerns out loud already.
Yeah. And it's so well written and delivered as well. It's very. That's the other striking thing about Puff specifically as a character. We hopscotched over our usual Raven character corner. I'm not going to go back, but I do want to leave one remark that it's a lot like Falcor in that really good, emotive, and warm voice acting on the part of whoever's in charge of Puff, and the animation is doing its best. It's doing its darndest. And it's real. He is really compelling and really compellingly written in ways that are, again, sincere, smart, emotive, and don't read as lewdly commercial. And so it's odd to have, again, the contrast of his saddest moment being something that is expressed non-verbally.
So the guy who voice acts Puff is Burgess Meredith, and he's a very old actor who died.
Sounds familiar.
In September 9th, 1997. So he died a year before we were born. But you would probably know him because he's a lifetime member of the Actors Studio. He won several Emmys and also the first male actor to win Saturn Award for Best Supporting Actor twice. He's very well known in Hollywood, specifically for his role as George Milton in Of Mice and Men, the 1939 version of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
He's also Ernie Pyle in The Story of G.I. Joe from 1945, and he has several appearances on The Twilight Zone.
Oh man.
He also plays the Penguin in the 1960s TV series
Batman. That's why
which is why I kept putting that one off, because I knew you would know immediately who he was as soon as I got to it.
I was like, Burgess Meredith. Was that the Riddler? No!
He is the Penguin from the Batman series you love so much.
Oh man, we really gotta watch some of that we gotta watch the Eartha Kitt episodes. Ooh. Eartha Kitt team up with Joker episode where she breaks him out of prison by pretending to kidnap him. No, she kidnaps him after he gets released from prison.
The point you were getting to, the voice acting was really on point, and the writing was well written, is what I think you were saying.
And like you were saying, it is odd that there is no like dialogue in the sad, in the all is lost moment in a show where its strongest point has been its dialogue.
Yeah.
I understand deferring to the emotion of the song, especially since if you don't revert to the emotion of the song, you can't use any more of the song after this. But it is kind of an unfortunate failing of the story of the adaptation.
I always felt you could have the song still be playing, and then in that moment before Jackie Paper comes back, you just have him deliver dialogue then. Because while this show, it's a children's movie, okay? I'm not trying to read too deep into a children's movie, even though I'm clearly doing that. But it's a well-written children's movie where you don't feel talked down to, even when everything is being explained to you.
Yeah.
It's not condescending, and I appreciate that in the writing.
There's that, that's a thing that's just consistently fun to get. Not condescending sort of children's literature. For all young children ages, from the very young for Puff here to, I don't know, slightly less very young for Phantom Tollbooth and Series of Unfortunate Events. Although I know that one is a bit more controversial for my for my co-host. You were too smart for it, unfortunately. You were too smart for it, and I wasn't. So we had different relationships with those books.
It explained every other fucking word. It annoyed the shit out of me. Oh, okay.
The point being, overall, we're just abandoning structure, ain't we? We're just letting the conversation flow because it's just, it's that sort of Puff energy. Well, you just want to go on the adventure.
To be fair, we've been in the Did You Mean That section for a bit now.
That is fair. Mm-hmm.
But honestly, the Did You Mean That section kind of had to come after the prelude discussion where we talk about the movie versus the story, because the biggest differences are the themes, the lessons being taught.
Very true. That is absolutely true.
So we should have just reorganized that structure.
Should have just reorganized it. Should have tried over again. We've covered, let's see here. I think on the whole, I think between the two, it is funny, this sort of consistent motif, and I'd love to see exceptions, and I'm sure that they've already been published at this point, with the rush of, YA graphic novels. By the way, Gen Alpha, I'm super jealous of you and your access to comics made for you. That was a thing that was not yet fully a thing when I was a small child, desperate for comics in the library. My options were like the Marvel All Ages Power Pack series and Diary of a Wimpy Kid. It was
manga.
Slim Pickens.
Mine only had manga.
Manga. I didn't know where they put the manga. I'm not sure I would have touched it besides Pokemon. It was very much,
or on High School Host Club manga.
It was very, for some or other reason, when it comes to children's media in particular, we're weirdly okay with things being a bit edgier and a bit more nuanced when it comes to text or audio storytelling.
Yeah.
I guess in the case of this song, than we are when it comes to visual storytelling, which is part of why I think they're unwilling to have the special end on the actual sad note of the series. They have to cushion it. But also these are people that, are sincere and genuine and seem to be enjoying what they're doing, or at least enjoying doing it well. And they still try to add a depth and nuance to it. And I think they accomplish it rather well by the addition of, elements like Jackie being, depressed, possibly, just inhibited by the world and by his
honestly,
own character.
The singer who wrote the song with the poet, Peter Yarrow, and I don't know if I'm saying his last name correctly. I apologize if I'm not. He actually is a big activist. And one of the he protested the Vietnam War, and he held a bunch of charity musicals for that to raise money for victims of it, but from mustard gas specifically.
What a nice dude.
Sick. Another way he's an activist was against child bullying. So he was a part of this the production of making this animated movie, because he plays the father as well, and I think he had a little bit of a hand in writing some of the script. I'm not entirely sure, but he's a very big activist talking against bullying in schools, basically. So it could be that Peter was just a victim of bullying, and so much bullying he just thought it would be better to stay in his room and never talk to anyone again than actually open up about what was happening. So having a friend to take him on a journey where he can easily make other friends with people, learning how, hey, yes, even the star got bullied by the clouds, but it can all get better. There's always someone willing to talk to you if you just keep putting yourself out there. Then that's a lesson you can take away from it.
Is this, let me just do a quick hop, skip, and a jump through our outline here, just for funsies. No scat today. This is a no scat day. There's enough music, I guess, in the song. Go listen to the song,
It's a
guys.
really good song. It's like right under 4 minutes, but it's really good. It's
a touching song. In the realness here, where we talk about stuff with real world context, you have it noted that there's an intended meaning of the song here. Is this bullying view a part of your intended meaning specifically of the animated series, or is this of the song itself as well?
So the intended purpose of the song was to talk about the death of childhood innocence. And coming to terms with that. But due to a rumor that was fueled by a 1964 Newsweek article, it became known as the song about smoking weed to escape into a fantasy land. But the band continues to claim it just has to do about losing the innocence of childhood and having to grow up. It doesn't have anything to do with drugs. And, literally the end of the song with Puff going back to his cave and staying there forever is the death of your childhood innocence. It's not drugs. But the Newsweek article pointed out how Jackie's name is Jackie Paper, how the band was kind of liberal. The whole song, the island they're supposed to go to, Honolulu, is named after a bay that actually exists that the band would go to write at and perform a lot. So basically they called bullshit. This isn't meant for kids. You're just trying to get people to smoke weed.
Your sick, twisted reefer songs are going on the radio to pervert the minds of the good Christian children.
And it doesn't help that Puff's name is Puff, then he's entirely green.
I mean, do they mention being entirely green in the song?
Yeah, his green scales fall off like rain.
Aww.
When he's in his cave depressed.
Dude, I don't know. I mean, speaking as if we were talking to good faith actors here, a thing we are not. That's just iconographic similarities. Maybe you could say that somebody, again, taking the mickey behind the scenes by using weed vernacular, but Puff and the concept of green and paper don't a weed cigarette make.
Oh gosh, they're not called weed cigarettes. Blunts. They're blunts. But the point
do not
of the matter
a weed
is,
cigarette make.
But the point of the matter
It
is...
do not.
God damn it. Who are you, Shaggy from Scooby-Doo?
Mary Jane? That's like my favorite name!
God damn it.
That's my Shaggy.
I've actually known people who know the song and have like done covers of the song, but not the last half of it, and they don't know the last verse, which about Puff dying. So they do assume it's just about weed, because if you don't have that last verse, it kind of loses the whole point of your childhood innocence dying.
Wow, how could you listen to this without the last verse? I couldn't imagine, like, anyone wanting to listen to this without the last verse. Not to be mean, but, like, that's where, like, I don't know. That's where the sadness comes that justifies listening to such a happy, cheerful, smarmy song.
It's where the angst comes in at.
It's where the angst comes in and makes you feel less like a weird child listening to a weird child song.
Ow! You don't gotta call me out like that.
I'm calling I think myself out more for my own like hypocrisy and shallow ego in that. But I'm glad that we both are hurting a little here. It makes it a bit easier.
So, in other like realness that affected the TV show, that affected Puff the Magic Dragon song and TV show, the lead singer who helped co-write the song, Peter Yarl, plays the father in it. So it's his voice getting sung all throughout, and it's his voice that, like, I think says, like, the first or second line right at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I recall.
And the two sound very different to me.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't have believed that at all.
But that is actually the case. And Robert Wrigley plays all of the villains, basically. He does all the sneezes and the pirate's voice. And he's a very old, well-known American voice artist. Or actor.
Nice.
Yeah. But that's all I have for real-world stuff. A Newsweek article tried to say the song was having hidden messages about drugs. And people just assumed that was the whole point of the song ever since, because they don't bother looking at what the band said.
It's so... If we were a real podcast, one that did actual, like, non-Wikipedia research, to call us both out, that actually, like, really genuinely cared about, like, context and, like, discovering new things about the world beyond the fact that there are a lot of movies in it, aren't there? I think that it merits investigation, this weird period of 20th century American pop culture discourse, where there is this idea that a song could have a hidden meaning that's has some evil subliminal effect on its listeners.
To go slightly beyond just the Wikipedia research that we both have done, there was a time period in the 60s and 70s up until mid 80s where a lot of people thought songs were about weed specifically, because anybody who wrote music at the time and was a known protester of, like, the Vietnamese War, such as Peter Yarl, they all got accused of smoking weed and being hippies.
Okay, so is this...
That was the political rhetoric that was going around about people at those times, and it's a political rhetoric that really stuck and became the cliche. Cheech and Chong as well were, like, two people who kind of fell into that.
So this
cliche.
This is not a product of, like, a moral panic spawning independently of anything. This is like an extension of that same Nixon era political, basically, like, besmirching that used drugs to try and, like, deface anybody that spoke out against the administration or was black.
That's what I personally think it was, because like, the citations I've seen of the Newsweek article, I haven't read the entire thing. It was published many decades ago. I wasn't trying to Google for the entire thing. I just looked at the quotes. It seemed very much of that same rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
And of, like, how the band was not to be trusted, because it was a song they wrote explicitly for kids and for adults who were like dealing with childhood loss.
Okay,
but they were already known for the protesting.
Don't listen to these people and their activism because they're making the evil reefer songs for your child.
Basically.
That doesn't explain the tendency to try and hear satanic and demonic messages, especially in songs that have nothing to do with that sort of subject matter. But that's a different matter entirely.
That's a whole nother thing. Specifically for this song, I'm nearly entirely positive it was from that propaganda.
It's just anti-protesters propaganda.
And because, like, people don't look at the history of stuff and they heard it as a joke from their parents that the song was about weed, they, like, still think the song's about weed instead of actually looking it up.
Apparently you can listen to the song enough to make a cover but still not hear the last lyrics, so I guess maybe some people might just. Because I could believe thinking it was about weed, because if you don't hear the last verse, the song isn't about anything.
That's fair.
So of course you'd believe it was about weed.
There's quite a few YouTube covers you can look up where they don't have the last lyric. They only really go for the first part, like the first verse, and they repeat it twice. There's a lot of like minute-long versions of the song out there.
I mean, I guess if you're going for really short,
I
don't know.
That's why I sent you a specific link.
Yeah, please do after this.
I sent it before, so it's already in your Discord.
I can't understand wanting to do a cover of this song and not wanting to do the last lyric.
Well, if you don't know that it exists, you're not gonna do it.
Well, yeah, I know, but I mean, is it just that hard to find like a version of the song with the last lyric? Is like there like a primary a cut version that goes around?
I don't know. I've only really listened to the original version because I know like the band name and everything. But I do know there's like lots of short like video edits of the song. That's just the parts from the movie and not the actual song itself. So if you've listened to the movie and you only know it from the movie, you're not going to know the full song because the movie cuts out most of it.
Yeah, and I guess that's fair. I mean, you can't listen to this song unless you're actively searching for it online, probably most of the time. And if you don't know what you're doing, yeah, fair. That's fair.
Or if you're like me and you had a relative who happened to listen to the band.
I guess that can also happen too. So, looping back around to kind of our intended path here, let's talk about the stuff that isn't the characters or the story or the big themes. I'm talking the mise-en stuff, which is just sort of anything else that was going on. I've already covered my thoughts on like the Bambi Frankenstein-ness of it all. I just want to have like one extra thing about the adaptation, if I may. May I?
Go ahead.
I love the intro.
Yes.
Like a lot. Like we've talked before about like how weirdly like well written and well like acted and like warmly spoken and sincere, all this, that like the let me say like a few more times here and you'll understand my shagginess that truly goes into the depths of my soul. This adaptation is good, is sincere, is well written, and I think it starts right off the back where like the first sentence is, as we're like cutting in to blackness, once, quite by chance, there was an extraordinary old universe, which is just the most like Schoolhouse Rock meets Terry Pratchett meets any given book you'd listen to on an episode of Between the Lions. Like it's rock solid. No, actually, it's not Terry Pratchett. It's Douglas Adams is what it is. It's very Douglas Adams. It's like Hitchhiker's Guide for Kids sort of opening. It's very, I don't know. It is at once existential and also warm and sweet, which is, I guess, what you want in your, adaptation of the children's song about the death of childhood.
Yeah, basically. That line actually makes me forgive, like, one of my only two complaints about the movie a little bit, because my biggest complaint about the movie, and I did not like this as a kid, and I do not like this now, is the children's psychologists very clearly come off as don't believe science, because it's not going to help you, and I hate that. Like, I hate that.
Really?
But at the same time, I do know there were, like, children's psychologists at the time who kind of just gave up instead of actually researching things fully.
I didn't read it as a dismissal of science as a
maybe
field.
It's because I grew up with, like, some very Christian relatives.
Oh, I see.
But that's how I kind of read into it, and I hated that.
I see.
But admitting the universe is old right off the bat kind of contradicts that a little bit.
You were okay. I see. You're just glad for anything that contradicts the Christian propaganda, the fundamentalist sort of view.
Basically, and again, there's lots of different religions in my family. Not everybody was like that, but there were two very specifically out loud spoken people who saw it, who like kind of took that as like, see, even children's shows know. So that always annoyed me, but then again, I'm also aware that there were actually like professionals at the time who just treated kids like that. They did not care. They just dismissed them as lost causes. So there's that as well. And the line at the very beginning kind of makes it a little bit more forgiving.
I've never met an ex-religious person that couches their like feelings on theism so like
you gotta remember
softly and politely as you.
I still there are reasons why I gotta. I'm not trying to insult people. I'm too used to having the discussions. Let's just continue.
You know, absent the context of fundamentalist breath over my shoulder, I've kind of just sort of interpreted these like 3 out of 4 unhelpful psychologists and 1 almost helpful psychologist as less an indictment of, you know, what modern science and heliocentrism and all that, and more just an indictment of, I don't know, I guess in the context of the larger story, I don't know, adult systems of order and ways of seeing the world. It was less about.
Read. I never.
It was less about
that.
It's less about the failure of science and more about the failure of our like hierarchies and our like the failure of the systems of power and knowledge that exist to like really address human needs.
If it was up to those people, childhood innocence would die a lot faster.
Yeah, kind of something like that. Just the sense of like they have no idea how to handle this. The system fails you. It's a classic. This is how the system fails you because of its unwillingness to like deal with humanity as it is. In this children's animated special about Puff the Magic Dragon, the mid-20th century novelty song.
That's fair.
Remember when we talked about an actual art house film?
Remember how we did that like 2 weeks ago?
Remember how we talked about an art house film like 2 weeks ago, and now we're on Puff the Magic Dragon?
They both handle grief and the death of childhood innocence and having to grow up. There are lots of overlapping here. They are valid. They are both valid. And I have a preference.
Certainly I plan on re-listening to Puff more than I do the soundtrack for Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life. We can handle a breadth of subject matter on this podcast. This is our skill. This is what's going to make us go big. You know, Mabim Bam's got, the brothers vernacular, but we have, the acumen required to, in a matter of a fortnight, go from Terrence Malick art house film featuring a CGI recreation of the entire birth of the universe to Puff the Magic Dragon.
And in both, I'm kind of a pessimist, but in one, I'm a pessimist who is kind of realist. But, I really want this to be reanimated at some point. I know it never will be, unless it's by a fan who's very dedicated and just wants to redo it. But I really want it reanimated, because the colors are kind of stale because they had to be at the time. It was difficult to color it in a way where it's stuck on old TVs when it was coming out, so you had to be like really dark shading and whatnot. And I kind of just want it I don't know. I would love to have it reanimated and it be all drawn out again instead of like CGI or something. And I wanted to have like the same style, but just updated, just redone.
Okay, so it's not a matter of you feel like the limits of animation budgets and technologies at the time kind of left it with some clear corners cut. It's more just very specifically the colors are kind of dull and you'd like to see the wonder.
I would like to see like the colors updated, and I do think some of the animation could be updated as well because there were limits at the time. Technology has gotten better. There are ways to animate things that make it seem more live.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I don't know. I feel like it would do really well if it was just redone. I don't want it to be like completely change the plot line and this time Puff is alone and Jackie's dead or whatnot. I don't really care about that. I just think it would do well for a cleanup.
Mm-hmm.
Like how Mass Effect Legendary Edition, the first game, did very well with a cleanup.
I look forward to playing that because I spent several like weeks trying to play the first one years ago, and I just sort of walked away later.
You haven't played Mass Effect?
None of them.
Holy
Finished none of them.
Shit, that's going on the list. I have the games so you can play them. I have the remastered version so you can play them. And when you're done, those are gonna be episodes when you're finished.
Oh boy. Oh boy. That reminds me, I need to kickstart help kickstart Into the Void at some point. That Mass Effect inspired RPG.
Oh yeah.
Wait. Anyway. Am I gonna cut that from the pod? I'm definitely gonna cut this from the pod, but am I gonna cut that random drop of another unrelated product from the pod is the real question.
Well.
Anyway.
It doesn't matter what you cut. It's probably
doesn't matter.
YouTube.
It stays in the video either way. Who cares what I cut from the pod? The video is raw. If you want the cinema verite, you go for the video version of this show.
I do edit the videos, okay? There are very explicit parts I cut out, including all of our all of that.
You cut out all the and ums?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I don't cut out all the and ums, and I spend a lot of time listening to this.
I cut them out.
What on earth? I thought you were like demonstrating to me your ability to just like let things sit as they are and really show people what it is. No, you're going above and beyond levels I can't imagine. Holy cow. How much time does it take you to do this show?
About 3 hours.
Oh my gosh.
It takes a little bit longer now that I put in like the music stuff, which I just haven't been doing for the middle sections.
I don't edit in any music for the middle sections. It's just what we make here, which is why I'm still so upset. If you've been listening, pause every time we go to a section break and listen to another 10 seconds of Puff the Magic Dragon.
Actually, that's a good segue, because we've done this whole month of dragons, and yes, we have another book we're reading at the end. That was originally part of the month of dragons. That's just another thing you threw on there because you can't leave the series unfinished. But I
can't. You've got to see the adventures of Pymer in the southern continent.
But I'm not making you watch all 3 fucking never-ending stories. Now am I?
Well, that's just you're a coward.
But we've done this whole month of dragons. We've had a lot of dragon topics brought up in theme media. And I think we should just spend the rest of our time just discussing dragons in general. Because I feel like out of all the dragon themed stuff we've discussed, this is really the only one where we've actually talked about the dragon a lot.
Where the dragon is actually like a central character?
Yeah!
All it took was the dragon being the only other main character. For the dragon to finally be like a central person and player. And not like... I mean, Draco, kind of. He was definitely, he was there from the start. He's a main character. He is definitely a primary role in like the progression of the plot and like the issue, like the main
stuff wrong with it. That movie.
There's a lot of stuff wrong with it, but at least the main conflict does revolve around him and a choice he has to make.
Yeah.
Like, to off himself eventually. But at least there's that. The same can't be said for the Harper Hall trilogy because it doesn't really center a dragon rider, and if it did, the dragons just psychologically are very different from people there. And then we have Never-Ending Story, where Falkor is kind of a really friendly car that shows up partway through the movie in terms of his impact on it.
Fuck off, dude. He's amazing. He's the protector
He's a really friendly car.
In the second movie, he's the one that the kid remembers most, Falkor. He remembers Falkor the most.
Wait, there's a time jump? I guess there'd have to be.
Yeah.
Because you gotta explain how the child looks totally different from he did in the first movie.
Yeah, there's a time jump in the second one, but it's not. I don't think it's in the book.
As you said, there's a weird motif of dragon featuring things not being starring the dragons as characters, or even or even really as villains ever. Not that we've touched a dragons as villain story. I don't think either of us could.
Dragonheart 2. We just
Can't wait for
that
sequels. One. The Dragon Month Saga, the Dragon Era will return with the That's what we're calling it now. Every time we sit down and do a Dragon Month, it'll just be an extension of the Dragon Era. Anyway,
what's gonna happen.
I don't know. So what's that about, right? I mean, the depersonalization of the dragons or the decentering of the dragons in these dragon stories.
Honestly, I feel like it comes from two things, really. Dragons are an interesting concept, but this is the same issue with sci-fi. When you have a sci-fi series and it's and you're always going to have a human main character because people can relate to the human main character more than they can relate to alien life. Just like people can relate to humans more than they can relate to dragons. I think that's a big reason why dragons are often either secondary characters or just thematic choices that are put into a story. I still hate it. I wish it wasn't like that, but I think that is a big reason for it. Also, on a past stream we talked about how dragons as a theme kind of touch upon, what was it you said? Was it nostalgia?
Well, I think that for some reason the decision that what a writer would be put to the decision to include dragons for reasons that would also push a writer to make a story that is about the nature of storytelling and genre and reflecting on older stories because of how strongly we associate dragons as a concept with the concept of an older fantasy story. Like how in Dragon Art, it's not just a high fantasy story. It's very explicitly a post-Arthurian story investigating the need for fantasy, ideas of morality and chivalry and stuff like that.
Even in the Puff the Magic Dragon song, they talk about kings and princesses and princes and pirates from older times and still play into that fantasy. It's more in the song than it is in the cartoon.
It's kind of a more basic level than even the idea of dragons as a connection to the motif of storytelling as a concept. When you're talking about Draco and his relationship to, the knights of before and King Arthur and stuff like that, that's more about a relationship in terms of traditions of storytelling and the way that storytelling works. This is a more fundamental level. Puff is coming around and talking specifically about imagination as a concept and the idea of the function of having a fantasy at all. Set aside the nature of storytelling and the function of that through time and ages and reflecting on prior stories. This is just about, hey, what's imagination got going on for it? What's the point of that? In fact, I think the animation helps better than that because it's explicitly using the idea of imagination as a way to allow someone to better connect with the real world in a way that I guess the song does too, except it's more about the end of engaging with imagination and the kind of the tragedy of that.
That's fair. I do want to point out, I think an aspect of the movie that really helps support that point of yours is how the style of the animation doesn't change between fantasy and reality for Jackie Draper. It's the same animated style. It's just once you go on the adventure, there's more to see in the background. But the houses at the beginning are still animated their grass and stuff is still animated the same as when you actually go on the journey. And I think that's I think that helps support your point because it's still that stylism, but it shows that there's not as much of a difference between the two.
Yeah.
As we tend to think there is between fantasy and reality.
Yeah.
Or escapism in general.
So, and then comes back to the question. Why are dragons so synonymous with stories and imagination? Why that specific mythical creature? Why is it not griffins or sphinxes or, I don't know, Quetzalcoatl?
Well,
why is it that?
To be fair, one reason why I really think it isn't any of those other creatures and specifically dragons is culturally. The culture we are in focuses more on dragons than it does griffins or literally any foreign mythology, including sphinxes. If you go to a different country and experience a different culture, I'm sure those would be more popular in certain areas, especially like sphinxes in Egypt, I imagine. But in America, I think part of the reason why dragons are so prevalent when it comes to imagination versus other creatures is because they can be literally anything and don't have as many rules that apply to them. Because dragons themselves come from legends people started after finding the bones of large mammals that had died off and no longer existed or were rare to see on land, such as whales and whatnot, and like the uncovering of dinosaur bones. They come from myths, and everybody thought dragons looked different from one another, and so things they could do was different from one another. If you try and explain what's something that all dragons have in common, I think you'd be hard pressed to find one specific quality.
That's definitely, and that sort of gets into the broader, tricky rant I could go on, but won't because we're running out of time, about this weird Western English language speaking storytelling tradition of trying to explain how actually dragons are in every culture when, actually what we're doing is just making a definition of a creature that is so general, so fluid, it could literally be just about anything if you tried hard enough.
Basically. Which,
I mean, that is part of our idea of a dragon, though. Yeah, the whitewashing element of it, the idea of dragons as being, something that is everywhere, is something that is part of this conception of the dragon as it exists in our culture. Yeah. That is very much a part of it, and that's sort of an extension of it. Like, if the dragon can be anything and a part of any story, that means it's actually a part of everybody's stories. It's that deeply tied to the idea of stories that everyone's making dragon stories.
And I think something can be a dragon story without the creature in it being called a dragon. And I believe that personally because we've seen that happen in real life. There's a lot of creatures from like Asian countries that kind of seem dragonish by an American standard that get called dragons in America that actually have traditional names that aren't dragons elsewhere. And while that does contribute to like the history of whitewashing and us not trying to educate ourselves on other cultures like we should be, and I am calling out Americans, we all fucking do it and we just gotta admit it. We gotta own up to it. Like, come on. But I think it's because dragons are so loose. There's a fluidity to them that even when it's coming from another culture and it'd be very easy to do the research, it's a lot easier to just be like, oh, that's a dragon-like creature, so that just must be a dragon.
Yeah.
And
it's that
I think that's what mass media really chooses to do most often.
It just, to choose to go down that easy path that dragons as a concept afford because of their fluidity, because of how closely associated they are with storytelling as a concept. We're willing to be like, yeah, I guess this is a dragon story. Sure, I believe that and that like gives us an on-ramp to engage with the story in a sense because it adds that level of familiarity. Which is weird because, again, it's so fluid, it can be anything, and yet we are at once comforted by its presence when we see it, even though it could be anything at this point, just that we know it and can put a name that we are recognized to it.
It's also, I think it helps that because it's so fluid, it grants creative people a lot of freedom for the story they want to engage with it while still hitting basic storytelling themes. You can use a dragon as anything. Symbolism, a key character, a theme, nostalgia, just
a violent threat if you want to be old school.
Even just a violent threat.
The specter of Satan himself.
I was gonna go with queer coding.
Same diff. Happy Pride.
I am actually wearing my asexuality at a romantic shirt today, so it's got a green dragon on it. I love it. It's more. My brother would argue it's a wyvern, but that's just another kind of dragon.
I would argue it's a wyvern. You bizarre woman.
It's way. It's W-Y. That's way.
That's why.
Whatever. The point
is it an Old English thing that I'm missing out on? Is this a Middle English pronunciation? Would that be a wyvern? That would be a wyvern.
Everyone in my family pronounces it wyvern.
I have never heard a wyvern. I kind of dig it, but I've always heard wyvern.
What? What?
I have always heard wyvern.
Listen.
Wyvern is fun, but it sounds like the R is in a different place too. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I've always read the R in the wrong place.
No, wyvern. W-Y-V-E-R-N. Wyvern. V-I-R-N. V-E-R-N. Wyvern. I don't think
the R gets like an extra added like vowel pronunciation. Wyvern.
Wyvern.
Wyvern. There's like a hidden invisible E stuck between the R and the N.
No, the V and E goes V. Wyvern. I think you're making this too complicated.
I think that you're making this up.
I'm not.
Okay, Wyvern. You know what's gonna happen is I'm gonna Google it. And I'm gonna find out that I am actually losing my brain. Because comment, like, and review. Is it wyvern or wyvern?
It's probably supposed to be wyvern, but my family's always pronounced it wyvern.
I'm fascinated where that came from. I would like to know more.
Irish, Scottish, Kentucky, Indiana. The 4 places I know Scarboroughs have been.
I mean, somewhere in there
I've also got Skags.
Somewhere in there is the home of the wyvern. I guess we'll have to figure that one out eventually.
Fuck if I know.
So, coming back around, if you're listening and you're playing the home game, play 10 more seconds of Puff the Magic Dragon. Preferably like the last like couple of verses where we've already had to deal with grief, and this is just like the sad version of the main chorus. Just play that. Okay, good. So this brings us to the conclusion. Where we do a fun little bit where we each reflect a little, except we've been doing a lot of reflecting. It's sort of like an infinite mirror of reflection after a certain point. I'll just say, listen to the song if you hadn't, if you're in for the mood of like kind of a bit of Pixar sadness. Have sort of that.
Of the band who sing the original song is Peter, Paul, and Mary, because those are the 3 people in the band. Peter, Paul, and Mary.
The popular band, Peter, Paul, and Mary. Jerry, Carrie, and Larry sit down and they sing this classic song. Stan, Trix, and Sarah sit down and they have a good old time. Give it a listen. I recommend it. It's very sweet. If you have a steel string acoustic guitar lying around, I definitely learn it to play at like a funeral in the future. I'm sure that any given relative of yours will be too dead to care if you play that at their funeral.
Or if you're like me, play it to go to sleep.
Play it to go to sleep. If you're like Taylor and have to constantly suppress your mind powers. The animated special. If you're listening to this podcast, I'd say yes. You've already spent like enough time it would take for Taylor to like get a full like brain suppressant session out of it. The full like 4 watch throughs actually at this point That's like an extra bit of brain suppressant. At that point, Taylor would actually get like negative powers that would allow her to open up white holes and take off the western seaboard if she wanted to. So yeah, if you're the sort of person that has listened this far into a podcast about an animated special that you haven't seen, about a novelty song that you haven't heard, go watch it. My goodness. Stop living your life watching media vicariously through others on other people online. Go and watch it yourself. Live.
Or you can continue doing that and watch it as soon as we're done.
Yeah, just watch it as soon as you're done.
It literally takes less than 30 minutes to watch the show and listen to the song back to back.
Yes, it does. Just go, be gone, and have a good time. Wait, stay here. Taylor. Hey.
Yes, I'm listening.
Having seen this sufficient times to prevent you from unlocking your carry abilities and going full Dark Phoenix on us. Do you have any thoughts on this recent rewatch through, and discussion?
I really enjoyed it. That's the thing. I've always enjoyed this movie, and while as I've grown up, I've noticed some things that I didn't before. It's something I don't have to think hard about and enjoy. There's like a whole like topic of discussion about what do the sneezes represent, but I just want to take it at face value, like, hey, sometimes kids get sick and this is how you overcome it. I don't want to think too heavily on that, but if I did, it would probably be white people bringing disease to native countries, but
it was smallpox. The sneezes got smallpox.
Oh my god. Smallpox cured with chicken soup somehow.
Oh man, if only the American natives had chicken soup.
God damn it.
That would have been the energy they needed to fend off the encroaching wave of colonialist violence.
Gosh, that's depressing. But hey, what did you think of it, newbie?
Like I've said, listen to it. Go listen to it now. Have a good time. Go enjoy yourself. We're just gonna be here talking about what's coming up next week. And oh yes, what is coming up next week? Oh yeah, we've got another. Our next week is our last guest episode in this big weird cluster of guest episodes. The long month of dragons is going on a little longer. Dragon drums will not be until 2 weeks from now. If you're waiting on more Pern stuff, don't worry, it is coming. However, we do have a fun guest. Her name is Billy. She is a blast. And we will be talking about the first book in the Warrior in the Air Chronicles series, The Warrior Air.
That's gonna be something.
It's gonna be something. It's definitely
my history nerd side. It came out like within the first 3 chapters because they keep citing very specific people from history, and I'm waiting for them to matter.
I very much look forward to dealing with this story that has a lot to do with actual like historical events and is playing off of them with, you know, people that actually know the history. I'm going to be like the doe-eyed self-insert for that episode, so get ready for me to be your self-insert next week, kids.
Have a nice night, everybody.
Everybody have a pleasant night. Take care of yourself. Go to your cave and live by the sea, and try not to be too sad.
Contemplate creativity.
Contemplate creativity and the fact that little boys don't live forever.
In any form.
In any form. Yeah, they don't stop. Yeah, they all die. Sometimes you die and sometimes you don't die. You just stop being a little boy.
Can we ever end an episode not on a depressing note?
No, we end episodes on happy notes all the time. We usually don't we? Dang, I think we have.
I feel like the dragon ones have been very depressing every single time by the end.
I don't know.
Maybe it's because they're dragons.
I don't know. Yeah, dragons always have to have a sad ending, usually at the end of a pike. But in this case, it's at the end of a human life.
Oh my god!
Puff the magic dragon
lived by the sea.